And now we're very happy to welcome the Reverend Mark Fowler.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
So
morning.
wonderful to be with all of you and see all of you. I just have to start by saying that there are a number of friends and uh, family members really on joining us today, but in particular, I have to say that Nadina and Jackie and I went to college together years ago. And it's just so beautiful to be able to be in friendship and relationship with people for so long. And my friend Eugenia, who is also a fellow minister from One Spirit, and Caitlin and Neil and Patricia. So my best friend Juan, I see, has joined, Melinda and Fume and Atiba. So it's just amazing, this technology, this moment that we find ourselves in, which certainly has had its challenges, but it's also had its really wonderful delights and rewards. And so I'm just glad to have the people in my life that I do. I also have started to make a practice of starting my talks and public appearances with a land acknowledgement. I'm speaking to you from my home in Flatbush, Brooklyn, which is the ancestral ceded and unceded land of the Munsee Lenape Nation, which extends over quite a bit of space. But I'm also putting into the chat a link where you might find, if you are not in the New York City area or in the tri-state area, the ancestral lands, the indigenous lands on which you reside, and want to acknowledge the leaders and the elders of the nations past and present, and ask that they would look favorably upon this time that we're sharing together. The topic today is faith, or the topic for the month, I should say, is faith. And I've titled this talk, The Myth of the Power of Faith, because I think that faith in and of itself is something that we all journey with, but truly acknowledging the power that faith has in our lives and in the lives of those around us is an interesting place to play and to inquire. As you know, I like to start with the gospel according to Merriam-Webster, and look at the definitions of faith. And we see first that faith is described as a noun, person, place, thing, or idea, and that faith is defined as belief and trust in and loyalty to God, belief in the traditional doctrines of a religion, not one religion, firm belief in something for which there is no proof, and complete trust. Those are the definitions of faith as a noun. As a verb, faith is merely defined as believe and trust. Those are that's the definition. When you think about the active participation, the active use of faith is to believe and to trust. And if we look a little bit deeper into those definitions, to believe is to accept or regard something as true. So we might say then that the power of faith is in our capacity and our ability to believe and to trust, and to regard the experiences and the acts of God that we have seen and that we have heard about as true. And so the question this morning becomes, what do I doubt as true when it comes to the power of God? And similar to the prayer that Dottie offered, and thank you so much, Dottie, for that, that there are those moments of either a weakness or a detachment or lack of understanding or just a lack of faith, like I stopped believing. But then how do I get back to that? How do I not allow that to be the existing condition, but a moment in this journey of acknowledging the power of God through faith, or the power of faith itself? So there are three questions that I'd like to explore with you for a couple of minutes. Regarding faith, what are we supposed to do? Or more to the point, what do you think you're supposed to do when it comes to faith? And then the next question would be, what do you do? What do you actually do when it comes to faith in your life? And what do you think you have to do? Because what you actually do, what I do, what we do, and what we think we have to do can sometimes create a tension that takes us out of the experience of faith. And then finally, the third question is, what are you called to do? How is faith reaching out to you and asking something of you that maybe has not been asked for before? A stretch, if you will, an expansion of your experience and your understanding and your practice of faith. So, this first myth is that we are faithful all of the time. And consider the word faithful as one word, but then also consider we are faithful, Full, faithful all of the time. And it is a beautiful spiritual aspiration to be faithful in many instances and in most, I would say, in many experiences of faith. To not have faith is almost not to be connected to God. And then we sometimes, though, take this to mean that we're supposed to be full of faith all of the time or faithful all of the time. And we then can struggle with, and I've struggled with, our capacity to be faithful or my capacity to be faithful. And what I find in those moments is that I'm usually judging myself about how faithful I am. And the ability to believe and trust is either weakened or absolutely destroyed in those moments when I am judging myself on this barometer or this scale of how faithful I think I should be. The Rabbi David Cooper said this: at the core of hope is a leap of faith, not that it will all come out right, but a faith that holds that what we do matters. How it will come to matter, who it will come to inspire, what positive effect it will have is not ours to know. And there's something about the practice of faith that has sometimes been shrunken down into what am I either asking for in faith? And if I get that thing, then that means that my faith is strong and real. Or that if I don't get that thing that I'm asking for in faith, then somehow my faith is weak. And I think that there's something quite brilliant about what Rabbi Cooper is talking about, that faith is a condition that holds no matter what we do. And we don't know what the ultimate impact or what the ultimate result will be, but we operate in faith in that we know our faith matters. We know that the actions that we're taking matter. The relationships that we're building matter. And the end we hope to be able to see. So we have the opportunity to direct our energy towards building our capacity to believe and trust and perhaps detach ourselves from the outcome. One expression of what faith is that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. So merely in the act of faith, the evidence of faith is unseen. You can't always know what the result will be, but the act of faith is in itself the evidence. And if that's so, then having faith, practicing faith is sufficient regardless of the outcome. And then when the outcome does occur, we can then ask ourselves perhaps a different question. Yes, we can celebrate the outcome, but then there's a deeper question, say, what have I learned about faith from this experience? How has my experience of faith deepened, regardless of what the outcome is? The second myth is that you have faith, almost like you have a pair of shoes, like you have them as a possession. And the second question that I'd like to inquire into is, what do you do regarding faith? Or what do you think you have to do? What do we think we have to do? Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind says that all doubt and fear must go, and in their place must come faith and confidence, for we shall be led by the Spirit into all good. So how are you doing faith these days? Like, if faith is a thing that you have, then how are you doing it? Is faith a practice to you? Is it a principle or an idea? And when you do your own self-assessment around faith, where do you end up? Like, where do the scales land when you do your own self-assessment around faith? Do you notice how often where you can acknowledge or say that your faith is lacking? And it's almost as if we think we have to have wonder-working faith all the time. Even Jesus didn't have all of that. There were moments where Jesus had to leave, had to go away to understand and strengthen himself to fully know who he was in relationship with God and what his purpose was, what the next steps were. So if Jesus could take that kind of time, I think I could take that kind of time. I think you can take that kind of time as well. And maybe be a little kinder with yourself as you're assessing how faithful you are. If we're only focusing on where faith is lacking, then we never fully acknowledge where faith is present. How many times have you believed something, known it to be true, and there was no evidence for that? There was no reason for you to think that the outcome could be the way that it was, except you just believed it and you trusted that it would go a particular way. How many times have you looked back at the result of a situation and been complete without any doubt in your mind that it was your faith in the circumstance, in the midst of the circumstance, that allowed you to get through it? And it's really critical that we get this, I think. You don't always get the result you want, but you're clear that faith was at work in the situation. I think that we are so compelled that things have to go the way we think that we then become blind to what God is doing. And perhaps if we could free ourselves from this almost, trying to think of the right word, almost obsession with the outcome, that perhaps then our practice can be and must be to know faith as a principle in our lives rather than having faith show up as a surprise or a last-ditch effort to get the results we want in life. See, there's not an expiration date on faith. There's not an expiration date on conditions changing. They may just not change in the way that you want them to. And then the question becomes, what can we see? What can we learn? What can we discern of faith and God in all of the situations in which we find ourselves? The third myth is that your faith at this moment is all there is, and it's all you've got. And it can sometimes be depressing that if you're a self-assessment of your capacity to experience faith, to use faith, to have faith use you is all that you've got right now, then you're kind of left with, if your assessment has been that you're not particularly faithful, then where do you go? The third question is, what are you called to do? Fundamentally, we're called to believe and to trust, and that is faith. But in that quiet place, you can hear Spirit communing with you, guiding and directing what the next steps are in your journey with faith. And just take a look, take a listen. What's next? Something's coming through about what's next for you in your journey with faith. Think about the first time you knew love for yourself. Not love like your friends talked about, not love like your family members talked about, but you knew love for yourself for the first time. That experience became the foundation of your journey in knowing love as you continue to go through life. And ultimately, there's that experience where you begin to distinguish not just knowing love, but you become love. There are aspects of the way in which you navigate the world where you become this thing that you have an understanding of. Faith is much the same way. When was the moment when you knew for yourself what faith was? Not because somebody like me was talking about it, and not because somebody in your family or your friendship circle shared about something that happened, but you knew it for yourself, that there was this belief and this trust in you that surpassed your own understanding, that gave you access to what to do, how to be, what to say, how to survive the moment that you were in. And what became possible after you knew faith. What's possible now if we can make that next jump from just knowing faith to being faith? How do you be belief, be trust? And what is the future for you in faith? Because you see, what you've experienced, the foundation that you have where you are up until now, is part of an ongoing journey of you and the experience of faith, you and the experience of belief, you and the experience of trust. Take some time to consider what's next for me and faith. Let today be the acknowledgement of what you know of faith and the foundation for knowing more. I leave you with this quote by Ruben Alves. Hope is hearing the melody of the future. Faith is dancing to it today. Let your celebration of faith be today. Let it be now. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure just to be with all of you, and can't wait till the time where we can be in person as well.